I want to immediately start discovering my chassis because that will take a few minutes. So I'm immediately going to configure these as a server port. All right. By the way, if you're doing this in your lab and you click this option, so hit configure as server port. So it says, do you want to continue? Yes. Always wait for this informational message. Sometimes it can take a while for the changes to be pushed down to the actual equipment. So be sure to wait for this message that it successfully configured it, because only after that the configuration is actually applied to the system. So we're detecting our blades again. So now we're working on a proper system. All right, so let me first touch on the management IP addressing. Like I said, the GUI has a specific, straightforward configuration here. By the way, when you walk into the lab, let me first talk about the tabs. So like I said, all the hardware is located here in the equipment tab. Then all the server policy configuration, that template and profile and policy configuration is here on the server tab. Then the LAN tab shows you, of course, all the network settings. SAN tab shows you the storage settings, and the admin tab is for all the administrative things that you need to do. So the administrative things, one of those things is configuring the management IP pool. In UCS 2.1 and 2.2, this has been moved to the LAN stuff. So they said an IP address is an IP address, so I don't care if it's a management address. I'm still going to configure it here as an IP pool. So the management IP pool has moved right now, but in 2.0 it is still found in the admin tab. So if you're looking for it, you'll find it here. And by the way, you can see these filters here on top, where I can go down one level into my tree view. So let's say that you will probably see that that initial configuration that you saw me doing is already done for you. So you log into the manager and then you say, all right, I need to configure some management IP addressing. And then you see this and freak out. I've had some people telling me this, that they freaked out when they saw this in the lab. That is because that filter is enabled and they say, hey, I cannot access all the other management configurations. What's happening here? That's just the filter. So just change that to all, and then you see all of your settings again. So they might play around with you by using those filter commands. Now the first page that you see shows you the out-of-band management IP addresses. So what is the virtual address? What is the physical addressing of the UCS? To change that, here I can change the IP addressing. So what I first want to do is I want to change my password again and remove the strong password check, because otherwise the revert script is I'm gonna get in complaints from my colleagues that I used a different password. So I need to make sure that I'm using the IP export 123 password here. Otherwise we will run into issues. All right, so that's corrected. So management IP pooling is done here on the left in the management IP pool section. Now there is not much to configure here, just a list of addresses. So I just say create a block of addresses, and then I specify exactly what is the address that I want to give to my blade. How much addresses will I put into this server? So how much access do I want to run? So I configure a number of addresses here. What is the subnet mask and what is the gateway? Be sure to configure your gateway. Why? Because I'm going to go out of my subnet, right? If I want to access my blades, I really need this IP address to be on there, to be reachable all the way up to where my management station is. So through a default gateway. So create a couple of addresses, and immediately what you will see is that these addresses will be allocated to servers. So I didn't do anything about that. It's going to automatically use the addresses in the pool. If the lab tells you that you cannot use pooled addresses for management, there is one more option, that is statically configure them. And that is the only server related setting that I do in the equipment tab. So I go into my servers, and here on the server, I go into the inventory tab, go to the CIMC, and here I can say configure a static IP address for the CIMC. So by default it's using the pooled management, but I can change that to using a static IP address. So if the lab asks you to configure static management addresses for your CIMC, this is where you do that. In inventory, then go to CIMC. So I don't care about that right now, because I'm using pools. Alright, so let's start configuring our server. Let's first create some VLANs, because I want to allow some different VLANs. So data, using VLAN 500 to 505. Creating some VLANs. DMZ, that's 701 to 705. There we go. So we have some VLANs now. I do not have any uplinks. Do I care? Yeah, let me configure some uplinks as well. Ports 9 and 10 are my uplink ports. Same as on Fabric Interconnect B. Configure as uplink. There we go. So now here in the LAN tab, we see them mentioned under the uplink interface configuration. They are by default enabled and are running in trunk mode. So these will be active right now, so I do have a link to pin my traffic to. Now let me configure some disjoint layer 2 configuration, because I want to show you about the pinning. So I say the DMZ VLANs go across interface 10, and the production VLANs go across interface 9. Boop, done. Do the same on Fabric B, of course, otherwise we'll have an issue. So data, 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 data. So this is a lot of clicking, right? There we go. Interface 10 are the DMZ VLANs. Add that and apply the configuration. So in just these 2 minutes, I configured my disjoint layer 2. Let's verify on the CLI for a second. So what I did is allow 5 VLANs, so that my data VLANs go on interface 9. That's where I see these 6 VLANs. And my DMZ VLANs go on interface 10. So I changed my allowed list exactly as I wanted to. So I can show you how that works in terms of the port pinning. Now the SAN uplinks, that's something we did not touch earlier. Like I said, I am running in NPV mode. How can I verify that I'm running NPV mode? So this is also something you need to check as soon as you walk into the lab. Now my authentication has failed, so I need to re-authenticate my UCS manager session. So that is something that I did not cover until now. But as soon as you step into the lab, there are a few things that you need to know on the UCS. One of them is, what kind of hardware do I have? So when you walk into the lab and you are starting with your UCS session, I would do a few things. So first of all, what is the number of blades that I'm faced with? Now you only know that after configuring the chassis initialization, of course. So that's something you do not know right away. What I first need to do is, do I need unified port configuration? Is that necessary? Because that is going to take time in either resetting the uplink module or rebooting the whole fabric interconnect. So be sure to, if I'm running a unified port, am I running Ethernet switch or end host mode? And am I running fiber channel switch or end host mode? So these two modes can be are independent of each other. So as soon as I log into my manager again, I can show you that the Ethernet end host mode or the fiber channel end host mode can be changed independent of each other. So I could run full fiber channel switching, or I can run full Ethernet switching, but I do not have to do that in the same time. So if I go to my fabric interconnects, here on the left in this column, I can switch down here. Do I want to run Ethernet switching mode or do I want to run fiber channel switching mode? Now the only thing that changes in terms of Ethernet switching mode is that I will not use port pinning anymore, but I'm going to run spanning tree. That's actually, in configuration wise for your lab, the only difference. I will run spanning tree when configuring this. With FC switching, some more things change, because now I do not have an NPV switch anymore. I do not require that NPIV to be on my uplink switch, and I'm going to configure an E port between my uplink switch and the fabric interconnect. So not a lot of different configurations that are needed, so just enabling switching mode will basically configure your network. And it's just about your uplink configuration that changes a little bit, because now I need to make sure that I'm running spanning tree, and for fiber channel I need to make sure that I'm running in an E port mode instead of an F port mode. And they will probably pre-configure this for you, so be sure to check where these modes are at, right? Check this, because it changes a lot. So it says it here, above here, what it is running right now. So be sure to check that. And after I ran my chassis discovery policy, there are some other things that I need to check. Like, what is the blade type? Is it a, so you are for sure that it is a B200 blade, but it can be an M2 or an M3 link, or an M3 blade. And like I said, it can be different for Ethernet and FC, and it can be different per fabric interconnect. Of course, production-wise, there is absolutely no reason why you would want to run different modes on different fabric interconnects. Technically, it's possible. And even when it is running switch mode, be sure to check your lab guide if that is the case. Maybe that's pre-configuration, a troubleshooting step. So they say your UCS is running end host mode, for example. That could be a lab task, but it is actually running switch mode. So be sure to check that. Verify your configuration, because you are logging into a pre-configured system. Probably you will not see any policies or profiles being pre-configured, but this is something that they can pre-configure, right? Same as for unified ports. They might have pre-configured unified ports, but the wrong ports. So they use the last two ports on the uplink module for fiber channel. You see that they are running as fiber channel ports, so that's all good. But the lab question could state that all ports on the uplink module should be running fiber channel. Something like that. So pay attention to the wording and pay attention to what am I having here? What is the pre-configuration that I'm dealing with here? It's unfortunately not that easy to just do a show run and compare your configuration, see what has changed. Here you really need to click on the items to find out what you are doing. So back to our checklist. Verify what blade you are running. More importantly, what is the adapter in the blade? So is blade 1 a Menlo card, or is it a Palo card, or is it a VIC 1240? Check this. What are my I/O modules or FEXs, right? What are the I/O modules? Because that changes. If I'm running a 2200 fabric extender, a 2204 or a 2208, that changes how much interfaces I need to allocate as server interfaces. That changes my chassis discovery policy. It changes everything. So what kind of fax do I have? What kind of adapter do I have in the server? What kind of blade do I have in the server? Am I running disks in the blade? Do I have hard disks in the blade or not? So some things, I would specify this in a short notepad, typing in blade 1 is an M2 blade with a Palo card and local disks. So when you are configuring your service profiles, you know exactly what you're doing and you can already guess based on your service profile configuration on what blade you will be applying this to and what to expect in terms of configuration. So these are verification steps, and this is a list that I recommend you making when you walk into the lab. So for example, what they can also ask you is configure a software package. And you know in UCS 2.0 I need to manually select what components I need to run specific software versions on. So I need to know what components do I have in my system that require me to create that firmware upgrade policy. So just a quick tip, when you walk into the lab, check your UCS and check what kind of hardware do I have that I'm running with. So I was talking about storage uplinks. I want to run some storage uplinks. Now the advantage is that every native fiber channel port in the system is always an uplink port, at least by default. That has to do with the fact that I do not run fiber channel down to my servers. It's either going to be an uplink or it's going to be a storage port, is what they say. So I can connect a local storage device directly to the Fabric Interconnect and not use a switch. This is not going to be the case in the lab. They will always want you to run a fiber channel uplink. So in my case, what I'm going to do is just take my Fabric Interconnects and configure my storage uplink. So network uplink we touched on yesterday. Now I want to focus on the storage uplink. So going to the UCS is going to be ports 1 and 2 that are connected to my MDS switch. Oops. So ports 1 and 2 are connected to my MDS 1 and 2. So on MDS 2, on MDS 1 I'm going to run a port channel, and on MDS 2 I don't really care. I'm just going to let them be enabled and I'm going to configure that appropriately. Now of course we first need to create our vSANs. What I did with VLANs is that I created them globally, right? So I configured VLANs that are active on both of my Fabric Interconnects, because that's the case when I'm configuring VLANs, right? I need to have them on left and I need to have them right. With Fiber Channel, that's different. A Fiber Channel vSAN is 9 out of 10 times only going to be active on either Fabric A or Fabric B. Never at the same time. So pay attention to that again in the questioning in the lab. Does my vSAN need to be, do I use the same vSAN on both Fabric Interconnects, or do I use different numbers? 9 out of 10 times it's going to be different numbers. So let's create some vSANs and say I'm going to run a vSAN on Fabric A, where I say this is my Fabric A vSAN. The vSAN is going to be 100. And for the sake of clarity, I'm going to use VLAN ID 2100. Create that. And I'm doing the same for Fabric B. (2200). This VLAN ID, that FCOE VLAN ID, is of course only significant on the UCS itself, because FCOE is only going to run between the Fabric Interconnect down towards the blade. It's never going to go out on an uplink when you are running UCS 2.0. When we are running UCS 2.1, of course, then I am going to use that particular VLAN that I mentioned right here, that 2200 VLAN ID. That particular VLAN ID is also going to be used on the uplink. I need to click Fabric B here. 2200, And I'm going to create 2 more, just to show you trunking. Oh, shit. I'm also going to create 101 and 2101. Fabric B. (201) and 2201. So we created a couple vSANs here. So let's verify that on the CLI. I see that I have my VLAN to vSAN mapping. You also see what the default vSAN 1 mapping is. That's going to VLAN 4048. I created the vSANs, vSAN 200 and 201 on Fabric B. So on Fabric A, I configured the other ones. And if I check my FC uplinks, I see that they are running switchport mode NP with a port vSAN of 1. We have that port vSAN number that on trunking ports doesn't really do a lot. And actually, trunking is disabled by default on the whole UCS system. So when I take my FC interface and when I want to change, so if I do not use trunking between my MDS and my UCS, what am I going to do here? Well, I'm going to select here the vSAN database membership. So this is the vSAN database membership. This is if I tell this to be 100, or actually let me configure Fabric B because that's where my CLI is in. If I select vSAN 200 here, click Save, that's going to be now my port vSAN on this particular port. Look. Because trunking is off, now I'm going to be running this uplink in vSAN 200. Of course, because this is a Cisco solution, I also support vSAN trunking. That vSAN trunking is supported on a per fabric interconnect way. So I cannot configure that per uplink. I have to configure that per fabric interconnect right here on the fabric itself. So as you can see here, I have an option to enable trunking of vSANs. And again, I cannot do that per link. When I enable that, it's going to enable that for the full fabric interconnect. So pay attention to what the lab is telling you. If you are using multiple vSANs from your MDS going down to the UCS, you need to enable this feature for sure. But maybe it's not necessary. Maybe I'm only running one vSAN, and then of course it has no use in running trunking. So then do it without. But again, check what your requirements are. Do you need to use trunking? Do I need to allow multiple vSANs? If I only allow one vSAN, does it require me to do trunking or not? If it doesn't specify trunking, do not run trunking. Use the defaults. I will hide myself as soon as there's something important here. But like it says here, if I enable uplink trunking, it means that it disables some vSAN numbers. Why it's doing this, I'm not very sure, because this is not a limitation of the Nexus or the MDS, but it will block a certain range of vSAN numbers when doing this. So when I check my CLI now, the port vSAN is still 200, but I enabled trunking now. That trunk mode used to be off here, right? Switchport trunk mode on is a command that it now puts on every fiber channel interface. These are not management vSANs because it's not using fiber channel to manage anything. It's only using Ethernet. So of course it is using them internally for some resource stuff. Just not sure. They're not using fiber channel internally. But yeah, they block it because of this reason for reserved or management related things. I'm just not sure which ones. So trunking is now enabled on both of my fabric interconnects. And the last step that I want to do is I want to create a fiber channel port channel on fabric A. So of course, same steps as in Ethernet. Then pay attention to that ID. When I already have a Ethernet port channel 1, I cannot have a fiber channel port channel 1. Those port channel numbers are going to be overlapping. So they cannot overlap with each other. So I have one range of port channels that can be an Ethernet or a fiber channel port channel. So if I'm using Ethernet port channel 1, I will need to use fiber channel port channel 2 here. So I'm going to say port channel 2. For that case, RIX FC port channel. Go next. Place some fiber channel ports in them and click finish. Same steps as for an Ethernet port channel. The system will warn you when you're trying to do this, when you're trying to overlap a port channel number. Enable it, disabled by default, and of course here I can set my port vSAN number again. Because I'm using trunking, this is not going to specify vSAN membership. No, it's only going to specify the port vSAN. There is no way in configuring a switchport trunk allowed vSAN command. So disjoint layer 2, disjoint fiber channel is not existing. I always run all of the configured vSANs on the fabric across a link that has enabled trunking. So my vSAN 100 and 101 that I created here are always going to run across my uplinks now. That allowed list is not going to change. So let's do it from the MDS side. So this is my MDS1. This is connected to Fabric Interconnect A. So I'm going to place these into a port channel, channel group 10. After it can be done. Let me first enable feature F port channel trunk, because otherwise I cannot put my F ports into a port channel. I need to make E ports before I can put them into. I cannot select which VLANs should go over which link, so I cannot select which vSANs go over which uplink. As soon as I enable trunking, that is. If I do not have trunking enabled, so just untagged vSAN ports, then according to what I select here in this vSAN drop-down box, that's going to be the vSAN that this uplink is in, and nothing else. But if I enable trunking, all of my ports are in all vSANs at the same time. That highlights the importance of assigning the vSANs to the correct fabric instead of globally. But again, only when you have trunking enabled. If you're not running trunking, then with this drop-down box, I determine the vSAN membership. But when I'm using vSAN trunking, I cannot do that anymore. Port channel 10, it says switch port mode F. So I have my port here in switch port mode F mode. So to configure, to have that connect to an NPV switch, right? I'm going to enable trunking because that's something that I enabled on the Fabric Interconnect as well. And I'm going to enable channel mode active. That is that PCP protocol that I was talking about. If you do not specify this command, your port channel on Fiber Channel will not come online. I'm going to put a vSAN allowed list here. It's 1, 100, and 101. I'm going to create those vSANs, vSAN 100 and vSAN 101. And I'm going to no-shut the port channel. And I see that my port channel is up and that both of the ports are up and running as well. So that was very, very fast, right? I also see a flaggy from the Fabric Interconnect. Why? It's an NPV switch. So an NPV switch is going to flaggy. Now I only see one vSAN being up, and that is, like I said, always the case with an NPV switch. An NPV switch is going to enable one vSAN to confirm that the uplink is running, and it's going to wait for client ports in the other vSANs before bringing them up. So I will only be showing you one vSAN to be up because I do not have clients in the other vSAN. So when we start talking about server configuration, you will see that I will create VHBAs in different vSANs and configure them like that. So then you will see that more vSANs will be up and running here on the trunk. So let's check this on the UCS itself. Show interface port channel 2, show interface SAN port channel 2, or 1. Oh, I did not configure it on Fabric B. NXOS A, SAN port channel 2. Here you can see the vSAN allowed list is all of the vSANs on Fabric A. You see? But only 101 is up because that's where I do the flaggy. So let's configure MDS2. Actually, let's start that through the console. MDS2. Not a mini admin, but an admin. I'm going to enable feature NPIV and feature F port channel trunk because I'm going to trunk multiple vSANs across my F ports. I'm going to go to my ports FC1, 9, and 10, switch port mode F, switch port trunk mode on, allowed, switch port trunk allowed vSAN 1, 200, and 201. No, shut it. vSAN database, vSAN 200, and vSAN 201. Now here you can see that only vSAN 1 is up and running. And on FC1/10 as well. So let's check that on Fabric Interconnect B, if that matches with Fabric Interconnect B. But there's only one up and running because that's eventually where it ended up in. That might even change when I change the port vSAN, by the way. So when I go in and change the port vSAN here back to 1, I'm going to see a flaggy in a different vSAN. Probably. No, not that right now. Let me shut it. Now I see a Floggy in 201. So this is my Floggy from FIB. And I see two, of course, I see two Floggies because I have two separated ports and they're not port channeled. So if I do a show NPV status, I see exactly what I expect. So I have two uplinks with 3 vSANs that are up and running, but only one with a Floggy in it. All right, so that is fiber channel uplinks. How I do vSAN configuration here. Like I do pin groups in the LAN side, so I can do client interface, so client virtual Ethernet interface to uplink interface. I can do the same here with SAN pin groups. And what this is doing is configure NPV traffic maps that we did yesterday. Remember? NPV traffic maps also say virtual FC interface to uplink interface. That's what I do with a SAN pin group.